Why are you here? On my way home, when I passed through a deserted park, I heard a cat-like cry from the trash bin. I thought someone had played a prank and got stuck inside, so I peeked in. There was my 3-month-old daughter. She was supposed to be home with my husband. In a panic, I called him, and he calmly lied.
Our daughter is napping.
I couldn't believe he would abandon our own child. Furious, I decided to make my husband suffer the same fate. I am Mary, 30 years old. At my workplace, I was courted by John, the son of the company president. We got married just 3 months later, and I became a housewife to support him. During our courtship and early marriage, John was very kind. My parents-in-law also blessed us, and I was living happily every day. However, as time went by, John's true nature, which I hadn't seen during our courtship, began to emerge. About half a year after getting married, I happily became pregnant. Since John and I had talked about wanting a child soon, I immediately shared the news. John said,
Really? Yes! It must be a boy.
I replied, We don't know yet, but as long as the baby is healthy, either gender is fine. John insisted.
No! Our child is definitely a boy.
Despite my reservations, he was thrilled about the pregnancy. From then on, John took it upon himself to inform our parents and colleagues that we were having a son. He even assumed the baby's name would be male and started buying boys' clothes. His unwavering belief became more pronounced. I worried. Is John really okay with this uncertainty? Months later, during a prenatal checkup, we finally learned the baby's gender. I hesitantly told John, the baby is a girl. His reaction shocked me.
What? Why a girl? I wanted a boy.
I explained that we couldn't choose the gender, but she was healthy and would surely be adorable. John retorted,
I don't care. It's because you didn't take proper care of yourself that it's not a boy.
I was taken aback. I'd never heard that my lifestyle affected the baby's gender. John's unreasonable blame left me speechless. Despite my efforts, I couldn't argue with his absurd reasoning. Would he love our daughter when she was born? For the first time, I felt anxious about our life together. Since learning our child was a girl, John's attitude toward me grew noticeably colder. Today is the day to buy baby supplies. Remember? I reminded him. His response.
I'm not in the mood, so I won't go.
I sighed. This wasn't the first time he'd canceled plans related to our child. When he thought it was a boy, he eagerly prepared everything. Now that it's a girl, his motivation seems non-existent. In the evening, John finally returned home.
I'm back. I'm starving. Is dinner ready?
It'll take a little more time, so please be patient. Despite repeatedly breaking promises, John acted nonchalant. Annoyed, I couldn't help but respond in an irritable tone.
What's with that attitude?
It's nothing.
You're so cheeky. Whose money do you think supports our life?
Frustrated, John pushed me on the shoulder. Ouch! I never thought I would be subjected to violence. With my growing belly making balance difficult, I stumbled and fell backward. I never imagined he'd shove a pregnant woman. Shocked by his actions, I felt pain in my lower back and tightening in my abdomen. I instinctively clutched my belly and sank to the floor. Ouch, my belly!
I'm sorry. Work has been stressful lately, and I lost control. I won't do it again.
Perhaps seeing my distress, John hurried over, helped me up, and guided me to the sofa. He brewed a warm drink and brought a blanket. It was the first time in a while that he'd been so kind. Thank you. I'm okay, now. Seeing John's concern, I wondered if stress was the cause of his behavior. I decided to forgive him. Some time later, I safely gave birth to a lovely baby girl. I named her Helen. She grew up healthy and lively. As I'd feared during pregnancy, John remained indifferent to our daughter. Despite my disappointment, I hoped that fatherly instincts would eventually awaken in him. One day, while struggling with parenting Helen, I received a call from my mother. She had been in an accident and was injured, requiring hospitalization. Since my father's passing, she had been living alone without any reliable relatives nearby. Although her life wasn't in immediate danger, I worried and decided to visit her. However, our family home was far away, and the journey would take a full day. I hesitated to take 3-month-old Helen with me. When I informed John that I was going to visit my mother, he responded with an indifferent and showed no interest in coming along. Despite my concerns about leaving Helen, I had no other option but to entrust her care to him. Please follow the instructions for preparing the formula exactly as I showed you. If you're unsure, I've left notes, so make sure to check. John replied,
I'll manage for a day. You better hurry, you'll miss the train.
Reluctantly, he agreed to take care of Helen during my absence. Initially, he wore a displeased expression, but after repeated requests for his cooperation in parenting, he seemed to understand. He even made an effort to learn about feeding and diaper changes. Perhaps this was an opportunity for John to grow as a father. On the morning of my departure, I left with hopeful expectations, torn between my responsibilities and my longing to see my mother. After a long journey, I safely reunited with her. She appeared more spirited than I had anticipated. With hospital arrangements settled, I stayed overnight at my childhood home. The next day, I had planned to spend the morning with my mother before returning. However, she called early, suggesting I come back sooner for Helen's sake. Worried about our child, I had initially told John I'd return in the evening. But I changed my plans, opting to take the first train home. As a result, I arrived at our nearest station well ahead of schedule, eager to see Helen. I walked briskly toward home. Wait, what's that sound? Along the path from the station to our house, there was a sparsely populated park. As I passed through, I heard something resembling a baby's cry. I glanced around, but there was no one else, no parents with children or anyone else nearby. It must be my imagination, a baby wouldn't be here. Perhaps it was just a kitten's mewing. Despite my rationalization, curiosity got the better of me, and I entered the park to investigate. As I walked, guided by the sound, it seemed that the cries were coming from inside a trash bin. Perhaps someone had played a prank, trapping a creature inside. Feeling sorry for it, I opened the lid to rescue whatever was stuck. But to my surprise, it wasn't a cat, it was Helen. What? Why is she here? I exclaimed. There she was, my daughter, Helen. Panic surged through me, but I quickly lifted her out of the trash bin. Helen cried intensely, but as I held her, she gradually calmed down. She looked at me and even managed a little smile. Relieved by her well-being, I sighed. But how could this be? Helen was supposed to be home with John. I hurriedly called John. Hello. How's Helen? John replied nonchalantly.
Oh, she's napping, so no problem.
I couldn't believe his obvious lie. Still, I managed a response and hung up. John likely had no idea I'd changed my plans and was already near home. He thought Helen's situation wouldn't be discovered, so he lied to me. Hearing his words, my trust and affection for him crumbled audibly. John had always wanted a son. Since Helen's birth, I hadn't seen him show any affection toward her. I hoped fatherly instincts would eventually emerge, but it seemed my wish fell on deaf ears. How could he abandon his daughter like this? Unforgivable. I resolved to seek revenge against John for subjecting my precious daughter to such cruelty. For now, what should I do? Taking Helen back to John's house was risky. After careful consideration, I decided to take her in a taxi to a certain location. As night fell, I returned home according to my original schedule. When I opened the front door, John came running from the back of the room, looking frantic.
It's terrible. I accidentally fell asleep, and Helen is gone. She must have been kidnapped.
That's serious. Let's call the police right away. I decided to play along with his story.
The police? Isn't it too early for that?
My mention of the police visibly unsettled him. Ignoring his reaction, I pretended to report the situation on my phone. John panicked and knocked the phone out of my hand. His face contorted, and he was breathing heavily. I steeled myself and got to the heart of the matter. Actually, did you take Helen somewhere?
What? You suspect me?
But Helen might have been abducted, and you haven't even contacted the police. Doesn't that seem strange? Caught off guard, John couldn't come up with an excuse. He became defensive.
I did it to test your trust in me. Just as I thought, you don't believe in me.
He started blaming me with intense anger. What? You don't understand? And what does Helen have to do with this? Tell me, where did you take her? As I glared at him, John softened his angry expression and smirked.
Ha ha ha, too bad. Your precious Helen is in the park's trash bin.
What? Are you insane?
Of course. By now, she's probably been taken far away or become crow food.
That's cruel. Is this how a father behaves?
Enough. It's your fault for not giving birth to the son I wanted. You've embarrassed me.
John admitted to being the culprit but continued to shift blame onto me. He had done something outrageous and was now trying to pin it on someone else. I couldn't contain my rage at his ugly behavior. I'm going to the police.
Humph. Go ahead if you can. You're the one in trouble, Mary. As a stay-at-home wife, how will you survive without me?
That's irrelevant. I can't continue with someone who subjected my precious Helen to this.
Well, it's your fault for not giving birth to the heir my parents expected. You've let them down and brought shame upon me.
John's selfish behavior left me dumbfounded. He said,
Listen, you only need to do what I say. Forget about Helen and quickly give birth to the next boy.
With a smug expression, he laughed at me, and I glared back in frustration. Then, the front door opened. Standing there were my in-laws, holding Helen. John's eyes widened in shock as he saw the parents he hadn't expected and the daughter he thought he'd abandoned. He nervously wiped his forehead, sweating. The truth was, after ending the call with John at the park where I found Helen, I took a taxi to my in-laws' house. I happened to find Helen and rescued her. I've already informed your parents about this incident, I explained to him. His parents had heard John's verbal slip outside. My father-in-law shouted at John.
How could you abandon your own child like that?
John stammered, unable to come up with an excuse. My father-in-law continued.
You were fixated on having a male heir, but just being a boy doesn't guarantee succession. You're fired.
John tried to protest, but my father-in-law wasn't swayed.
We'll also nullify any talk of you being the next company president. Our family ties are severed, so don't come to us again.
John, who had always been confident and boastful at work, couldn't defy my strict father-in-law. John trembled and shed tears. I said, Since I'm the leaseholder of this apartment, get out now. John pleaded.
Wait, Mary, are you really abandoning me too?
Despite losing his job and being rejected by my in-laws, he desperately apologized.
Please forgive me. I'll properly care for Helen from now on.
What? Now you say that? You abandoned your own child, and just because she's not a boy?
I messed up, but I don't need to obsess over an heir anymore. It's fine. And, I'll take care of parenting from now on, so you can work outside.
Don't belittle me. I'll never forgive you. I never want to see your face again. I looked down at John and delivered my cold response. His last hope shattered, and he sobbed. Despite some resistance, my in-laws pressured him, and he eventually packed his belongings, shoulders slumped, and left. Our divorce was finalized. I claimed $20,000 in alimony and $100,000 in child support from John. My in-laws covered the payments up front, and John, now jobless and abandoned by his parents, lives in a rundown apartment, working tirelessly at a physical labor job day and night. As for Helen and me, we returned to my hometown where my mother lives. We live happily with my recovered mother and our adorable daughter. We maintain a relationship with my in-laws, and Helen is thrilled when they visit. Together, we shower Helen with love and ensure her happiness.
How did you like this story? If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing to our channel. Until next time.